Omar.
Moro.
Okay.
What kind of info?
No, you're not echoing to me.
Okay, so go live now. I hope it's not. I doubt it. Probably this should be the best stream you should be using.
I think I need to stick with it because really I've been going back and forth just to see which one is really compatible with.
I think this is
Uh,
better.
yeah, I think this is better too. I can hear you better. I think what I'll do, in fact, I think we'll just start and I'll just take the other one down. That would make more
Yeah,
sense.
we can just start. Yeah.
We're actually live, so give me a second. Echoing to me. So once again, welcome everybody to our today's episode of the Dialectic Space podcast. My name is Ibrahim Sonko. I am the host of this podcast that comes your way every weekend and sometimes during the week, depending on the availability. Uh, Obviously, we started earlier on the other stream, and for some technical reasons, we could not continue on the platform. So we apologize for that inconvenience. But we're here now, and we are going to continue with the conversation. And my guest today is Omar Malmo Sambou. And Omar, I want to make sure that you are not upset with me for not adding your correct
Um,
professional title to it because I know Gambians worry about that stuff a lot.
that's a boarding, bro. I am Omar. That's as simple as that, bro.
But
and
yes, you've been on really since I started a frequent guest on this platform, and I wanted to really talk to you in a much more comprehensive way to understand who Omar really is and your professional journey, obviously from University of the Gambia all the way down to your further postgraduate studies away from Gambia and then to the United States where you are. And I hope that after that, we'll also get into other issues on your climate advocacy work in the Gambia and land advocacy and land justice in the Gambia. And also, we're going to wrap up this conversation, or this dialogue with important issues back home. You've also started a campaign for, I think, some police, um, related matters that I think I do not really understand a great detail about, but I think it's important to also for us to set light on that. And I think we'll try to finish this conversation with the recent arrest in the Gambia of the gentleman who appeared before Peter Gomez of Coffee Time. Peter Gomez is becoming extremely popular for either the right reasons or the wrong reasons, but I think we can also dive into that a little later. So, Dr. Omar Sambu, welcome to the podcast.
thank you very much, Ibrahim. It's good to be here. Like I said in the other one prior to us leaving, my name is Omar, like you already mentioned, and it's always good to be here. I'm not everywhere, but I'm very happy to be here. You and I know we're way back, and you've been a very great, instrumental young person that a lot of people would, in a way or another, look up to because, you know, very calm and collected person, irrespective of differences here and there. We would fight, but at the end of the day, we will have a consensus as per, you know what, this is the take, and this is my take, and life goes on. Another thing is somebody from Brikama would not tell somebody from Brookwood what is right or what is wrong. But yet again, that's your uncle. So unka sonko kunnon kolle bo nyam olmu jambaro olmu salamulle.
I
So
know.
but I'm so happy to be here and to have a conversation with you. And it's difficult to talk about oneself, which I don't think I've ever done ever. But like any other young person in the Gambia, I grew up in Brufut. That's home for us, and that's everything that we own and we have, and that's the community we love,
Not a
and
real
that's
place. It's not a real place.
and to be specific, Nyafule in that niche actually made us who we are today. And that's the community we're very proud of. And that community, not in the sense of just the geographic location, but the humanity, the people, the shaping, that you don't just belong to your parents, you don't just belong to your household, or you belong to the entire community. One thing I can tell you, go to Bruford, you talk shit about me, anybody can beat you up. That's a community that loves me.
They
So
do.
I
There's a
grew
lot of them. There's actually a lot of them in Seattle here. And anytime they see me talking to, they're like, "Oh, you know Omar Malmo?" I said, "Yeah, he's not a serious person."
yeah,
And
that's the
they're quick to
community
say, "No, he's a genius. He is so smart." I said, oh my God.
That's the community I would forever be grateful to. So, Bruford made us who we are. We quite very stubborn kids growing up. I wasn't one of those very serious folks. We love to play football in the fringes of Salkirato and all of that. So school was nothing of great significance to me. For some reason, my dad's brother was in the army, and they're like, "This kid is not going to go to school." So what happened was, when I was third grade, we had this teacher who likes to, drink porridge in the class when he's supposed to be teaching. So for some reason, I don't know what happened. He was drinking his porridge one morning, and I said to him while he was putting in his mouth, I said, "Goal." So this guy was like, "I'm going to flog you today." So I jumped through the window and I left. And I was like, "I'm never going to come back to school again." But because I grew up under my grandmother, my parents moved to their house. My grandmother, I stayed with her. She pampered me like every little kid that your grandmother would take care of. So it was like, if you don't want to go, it's all right. So for some reason, my dad's brother in the army, was like, I got to take him with me. And I had to be in Farafenye, stay in the military barracks. So I grew up partly in a military setting. So, I went to Farafenye proper for 1 or 2 years. And then I was taken to a missionary school. You know how stubborn kids are. So there you have to leave and then survive on your own. So that's why most of the times with my life is I look around, I'm like, you don't know how I survived to get to this level. You know, like every other person have their own stories. Not that it was extremely difficult, but you're within the midst of your own age mates, a little bit older, be able to so my funny do booty, and then you grow up in that setting where and that's life altogether. So you live with families that are not your biological family, but they take care of you. They made you a better person. So it's typically like a Christian community, a Manjago. That's why I speak Manjago like I speak Mandenka.
Oh
So
wow, I didn't know that.
so I grew up in that kind of setting all the way high school. I had to go to science one class. I had to determine what to do at university. Nobody interfered with what I wanted to do. So I had no choices. You had no options. As there were a lot of options, but like you do not know why people go to university. There are a lot of youngsters who go all the way high school. They have this mentality: I'm in a science one class. I need to go to medical school. I need to go to nursing school, or I need to go to an engineering school. That's all you know.
Hmm.
There was no connection. More so if you don't have big brothers, and also you don't have like close family members who are already going to university, even though we had graduates, but like there was a distinct connection. So you were all on your own. So you had to determine what to do. So I did not know what to do. I went to the admissions office at the UTG, and the lady, I said, you know what, I want admissions. And I bought the form, I filled everything, but I did not feel what to study because I did not know what were available to study
Yeah.
apart from what I know. Because the first form my dad bought, he put medicine and stroke nursing. I was like, I don't want to do any of those. So I went back myself and I bought a new form. So I went with that form to the admissions office and I asked, what exactly is here to study? So she told me a list of programs and later told me there were two new programs, one on computer science and there was another on environmental sciences. And I was like, yeah, I probably would do that on the basis of one of my friend's neighbor, and he was just within our neighborhood actually, was working at the National Environment Agency and was traveling a lot. Young people. And his name is Ibrahim. Ibrahim and I wanted to. We also got to get out and then do some other things and get a job that would take you all over the world. And I was like, I better do that.
Hmm.
So that's how I got myself studying environmental sciences. And out of curiosity, I kind of fall in love with what was happening because of its diversity and multidisciplinary nature. You got to do courses in School of Business. You got to do related,
Log. Yeah.
exactly. You got to do related courses to law. I
Yeah.
remember taking courses with Almami Funding Tal and other people. You have to go to public health to take a course. You have to do courses in biology, chemistry. So it was like a combination of almost every other thing. I think the only school that I did not take courses at the UTG would have been, journalism.
Yeah. Or you go to Banjul too?
I did not go to Banjul, but like School of Medicine and Allied Health Sciences is where you have public health. So if you have
Okay.
to take public health courses in Brikama, it's still within that school. But I did not have to go to, journalism school, which was established a little bit later. But aside that, most of the schools I had taken one or two courses in there. So that multidisciplinary nature of the subject made it quite very interesting for me. It was a good life at the uni. You get to know a lot of people from different schools and different, academic fields. And It was fun with the likes of Manga, you, and the politics of it is that I was never much into university because I came to university when I was just 18 or so. So I
Hmm.
was very little and quiet. I did not understand a lot of things that were happening. So as a very young person who is coming from a typical missionary setting, you find yourself in a university and 1 2 years I think I had to be a deputy minister for an agriculture and environment minister. I start understanding the politics of students here and there, and a setup from your team was built, and I was like, yeah, I could be part of this. But fast forward, what happened was I got a lot of people that I also went to school with, and I know, and they were coming from the School of Business and Public Administration, and they came to Brikama wanting to get some nominations. And I was like, you know what? Voting for you would not be probably appropriate, but we can get you nominated and you can get into your politics. And some people in that camp felt, no, you shouldn't nominate them. And some people kind of started vilifying me in a way or another. Knowing me from a missionary setting, you defend yourself
Yeah.
through the thick and thin, you defend yourself. It's like, okay, you insult me because I'm helping somebody get a nomination. All right, do whatever you want to do. So, the campaigns get on. Some people got voted. There were, student politics here and there. Sometimes we have fights in congresses here and there. And eventually, I think the following year, was there was a lot of controversies around the UTGSU with buying, goods from Yahya Jammeh,
Yeah.
giving them 200,000, and some of the goods escaped. Imagine, like what we are hearing from some of these commissions, something like that happened. Like they bought goods for a party and the goods escaped and stuff like that. Talks around that brought about some fights at Congress, different camps, and eventually it was election time.
Hmm.
But the people who were unsatisfied with, that good escape and things that happened, and in the Congress too, the auditor did say that, he gave a qualified audit opinion, which at the time I did not understand what that was. But in auditing terms, that means that there were irregularities.
Yeah.
So, and it was fast coming to elections, and the camp that was not in government at the time wanted us to go to Banjul for another congress. Probably when some fights erupt, they would tell Jammeh, these people ate your money.
Hmm.
It's like that's not cool. So they actually got a whole setup of people in the electoral commission, and then until towards the end, even people in the electoral commission have their camps.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
somebody within the commission belongs to a different camp and decided to resign towards the tail end of about election period. So there is no way they could actually organize another congress, because that's the intent of the other camp, so that there could be another congress to say these people ate this money. And the next Congress, if it was to be held, was going to be held in Banjul. But the Congress they held was supposed to be the conclusive Congress for that government.
That's
So
correct.
to say that just to replace this one person, they have to go back to Congress, was like, what we are going to do is we are going to invite all the sub-association heads, and they will join the existing electoral commission to conduct elections. We don't have time, or we don't have the space to go about, going back to Congress for whatever reason to just get one person who deliberately decided to resign. But to be honest, it was a lot of politics.
Yeah.
Now, we had a whole camp that was coming into the elections. And of course, there is another camp trying to get candidates and people. I wouldn't get into names and all of that, because those were very tough controversies. And some people, you still have
Yeah.
those
Absolutely.
bitter moments with up till date.
Yeah.
So what happened was, there were people who were to run for elections, and they had in their own plan that we will wait until a day or probably the day of the interviews of the candidates, and then we will ask a presidential candidate to withdraw, because as of now he's the only one who is vying for it, so that there will be another congress. The whole point was based on, we got to account these people for these goods that escape, or for things that they have done that we think are not right.
Hmm.
Not knowing that, of course, that team too that was in government had their team within, and also had some intels and information that were flowing from both sides.
Hmm.
So I bought a form. First, I was to buy a form for Secretary General, but the School of Business and Public Administration were like, dude, you've been supporting our people, so we're going to make you run for president, and we are not going to actually get a candidate from our school. That's a very popular school.
Yeah.
If they defend you at the time we were at the university, you eventually win. So the candidate from the other side too got admission, his admissions letter and his student ID was for School of Business and Public Administration, but eventually took a departmental transfer to mathematics in Brikama, but was in a way using that card to say, I belong to this particular school, but did not get the backing of the school. So until the day of the interview, most of the people in Brikama who were mostly the other camp,
They all withdrew.
they were actually nominating me, but there was no position filled on the form.
Okay.
So that is why it's important when you are doing things, pay attention to detail. Because
Mhm.
before I nominate you because I know you, that shouldn't be the point. I should ask what exactly is the position you're running for, if I'm comfortable with that. But you nominate, oh, well, I thought. And then at the end of the day, I was like, I thought you wanted to be Secretary General. Oh, that was a presidential form. Okay. So the other team thought, we also did not want them to know the kind of forms we were buying because we are also playing the same game. So until the day of the interview, the whole panel sat and everybody was out there. For some reason, this candidate did not show up and then communicated to the EC that, oh, I'm withdrawing my candidacy. We knew that was what was going to happen. And we have a whole house of people who were already ready to run. But that was a master plan.
Mhm.
It's like as soon as they withdraw because they're looking for this particular problem to be solved because they think, oh, we ate money, they want to get to jam here and there. It's election period. We have a whole team ready to run. Let that be it. They withdrew. One thing in life is, it's your right to withdraw. It's my right to run.
Yeah.
And then we all went in and it was like, yeah, most of these folks are unopposed. That's just what it is. And then the next minute was like, no, you are one of us, withdraw. We want to actually make sure that we account these people. Your interest is to withdraw. My interest is to run. How you do that accountability doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
And that's where we started having those, issues. And of course, we had a cabinet in government at the UTGSU. We ensured we had, those transparency issues that needed to be done. There was a little commission set up with the administration to look into those matters. But at that time, issues that have to do with JAM are very critical.
Yes.
Even the university administration did not want that to be escalated. It was like, what, let's deal with this professionally and just let it, kind of deal with it within the university frameworks and just get it going. So
And
that was basically how, eventually we run UTGSU. We had a lot of things getting on, folks traveling here and there, a lot of controversies, a lot of fights with, the group where you belong to, and at the end of the day, we got you got support from your own people. You want them to become presidents. You got to defend them through the thick and thin, even if it was getting on with some people. That we did, and we were involved in a lot of controversies.
And that's what I wanted to say. I think at the end of the day, what I've come to learn is it's all about winning.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're into politics, even though it's university politics, it's not as escalated and as sort of tense as it is at national level, but it's still university politics, right? And
Yes.
everybody wants to win. And so in your effort to try to win, sometimes you clash with other people.
Yeah.
But one thing I really admire about you, which I really want to highlight, is even when sometimes that you felt in your journey or in your strive to win, that you've made certain calls that were in fact very uncommon, things that you otherwise would not have done in an ordinary day. And part of what I really appreciate is when I came to you, I had the opportunity to say, hey, Malmo, hey, not to specifically get into that particular subject, but to say that, hey, you made a move and I thought it was wrong. And I think you need to take responsibility for that. I was young, bro. You were older than me. You took me in, you listened to me, and then you literally apologized to me, even when you didn't have to. You owe me nothing to apologize to me. So I really, since then, I'm like, yo, a lot of what is being cajoled about you, or a lot of the perceptions that certain segment of the university has about you, because I feel like they don't really appreciate that bit of being really, you can disagree with somebody fundamentally, but you can still appreciate them for who they are as human beings. And I think you've always been really open to that.
Life in general, the person you did not talk to is the person you can actually have opinions on. I've seen people who would probably even write something about me. The next minute I said, that I am the Malmo you're talking about. Oh, no, I did not know. I said, yeah, because I know you did not know. Because if you really know, you wouldn't say what you're saying. So generally, of course, I would get it hard on people. We get, things get tough here and there. But somebody who tells you, dude, I think what you did was wrong. You could have done it better, or it could have been done this way other than the way you did it. They are open to conversation.
Yeah.
They are entitled to their bit of it. They are as equally intelligent as probably or more intelligent than you. It doesn't matter their age or they're younger or they're in a lower class or they met you already in university. Your ability to listen and resonate with people and understand that, you know what, I'm not an island. And of course, I know during those periods, I wouldn't say much, but anytime I got to say something is hard
Yeah.
because I would just listen to a lot of it a lot until I get to a point that no, I got to stand my grounds. I grew up in a setting that, you know what, you got to defend yourself when you know it's getting too much. But that does not mean that every time you got to defend yourself, you're right.
Yeah.
And then I agree with a lot of people that, okay, and that was one thing, if I'm to be honest with you, that is one thing I wish up till day that I never even had to do. I wish I could have just ignored it. But you know, some things, what happened, if I was to tell you really what happened, you know, there were people at the University of the Gambia, you know, Jammeh's regime.
Yeah.
Dude, I wouldn't jump and just get into things that do not make sense to me.
Hmm.
You remember we had this grading system problem. It was the students that agreed that they will not go back to class. It was not my decision.
Yes.
But then you got a lot of people at your faculty at the time who were working at the State House, there were a lot of NIAs in your faculty at the time. There were people very connected to the regime at the time. But of course, there are also people so much into student politics who would sit on a radio. Imagine sitting on a radio, say, I'm taking UTGSU's money to buy shoes. Like, okay. But those are student politics. I wouldn't take that seriously. But on a radio, you might think that, oh, but that's too much. You know? Okay, I would take that. It's very okay for one to say that here and there because maybe they did not understand, or that's just student politics. But to the point of reporting me to the NIA that I was pulling people out of class, which I never did, that I was calling for a protest in the University of the Gambia to seek the release of Sid Matijao, which I never did. So at some point I was like, you know what? You can let go because you're the student president to a certain limit, but not when it is about your life. Because in the Gambia, when it's about protests and related things with Jammeh, he does not compromise with that. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, if Almami is still listening to this, there was a day I was with him and somebody somewhere around Westfield, and a minister of higher education had to call and say, wait for me where you were. Imagine in the public at Westfield, the minister came and, you know, his exact words were, be careful. I'm going to be soldar. He was coming from State House. I was like, I did nothing. I never called for no protest. But at that point, I got to the limits. I was like, you know what? I got to defend myself. So even up till date, like you and I had that conversation prior. I wish I never actually had to go that far with those folks. But sometimes if you understand what is behind all of those things and all the talks that were happening, you realize that, you know, as a young person, 22,
Yeah.
23,
Yeah.
you're not the perfect person. Up till date, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I was not probably the best of myself to say one thing or another to somebody. I'm not one person who criticizes people or say demeaning things to people here and there. Even if you say it to me, I just take it as, you know what, you're only saying what you do not know because,
Yeah.
you know, people from humble beginnings are not brought up to really castigate other
Yeah.
people or to tell people things that are not really nice. So that still I feel I wish I never did. But you know, sometimes also it's necessary politically to stand your grounds and make sure people understand that you are human. You too have feelings and you too, it's just student politics. Nobody was paid for it. It's just
Yeah.
it was just idiotic. But at some point I realized that no, this is more than just that. This is serious business.
And also, you know, like especially, I mean, I'm not immune to those experiences myself. I can tell you that for a fact, and I think you and I share that in common. Those experiences, in many ways, has shaped us into being who we are today, in terms of our careers or in terms of different opportunities that we find ourselves in. Because it exposes you, it also molds you
Yeah.
a lot, especially in respect to leadership. But now, obviously, you know, University of the Gambia, then you did your program, you finished your program, and then I think you worked for University of the Gambia after completion, and then went for your, master's abroad, and then PhD. Just very briefly, walk us through that.
So what happened was I completed UTG around end of towards 2015 precisely, and I think I was in the graduation class of the 5th of February of 2016. So because I was student president, you know, Jammeh would always give you money, and of course I studied environmental sciences and I was top my class, and then I could go home with some thousands from Jamme, so which was great. By the time too, Jamme used to give scholarships to the outstanding students, and then while we were in that process, it got all the way to December and he lost elections. So I worked briefly for the University of the Gambia as a graduate assistant to Professor Lamo, who was Haitian who studied in Germany but was on a UN mission at some point in Gambia and later came to establish the environmental science program at the UTG. So it was just a formality because I had to work somewhere, or I wanted to start work with government. He said, what, come to university, you got to, kind of move on with your career, not really to get into government and stuff like that. And that is one thing that that never get lost on me, because imagine a professor telling you the difference between you and I is that I have an academic paper that says that I can conduct research independently, which is just a PhD, but I believe in your potentials and I want you to be my assistant and I'll make. So I went to an interview and then this guy was like, it is what it is. We all know that's a smart kid, and then we just need to get him on board. And that was how I started working. So I should be very grateful to the UTG. Like, the UTG recruited me and I started work there and as a graduate assistant. And within 8 to 9 months, I was given an IDB scholarship to do a postgraduate master's in. First, I was to do an environmental engineering program in Pakistan. Or it should be an IDB country. So I later ended up studying in Brawijaya in Indonesia. So after my program, I think my master's program, I should have done it in 4 semesters, but I did in 3 semesters. So because I had to do my coursework in 2 semesters. And imagine you live outside, it's not your country. The only thing you got to do there is to work on the academics. Yeah. So I had to work on my dissertation, get my publications done. And then, I graduated at the end of my third semester. And towards the end of the year, I went back to Gambia. But already while I was graduating, because I graduated 4 out of 4 on a grade point, so I eventually got the Vice Chancellor's Academic Excellence Award for a PhD. So I came to the Gambia briefly, and it was COVID. I did part of my coursework while in Gambia, and then I later had to travel to Belgium, where I was in another program at KU Leuven University while I was corresponding with my professors. So I had to later go get all the paperwork with a PhD and then focus on my research, which I did in the Gambia. And of course, some students in my undergraduate class were very much helpful. And eventually I had to do a lot of publications on environment and related things, different diversity in most of the papers that I had to do, because my PhD focuses on natural resources management and development. And it was mostly on social innovation and climate resilience in the Gambian context. And then first I look at the socioeconomic and environmental sustainability of ecological tourism in the Gambia and try to derive some policy actions that could be done between science and society. So, which was quite great. And we did quite a lot of, high impact publications on it. And, I needed 2 for a PhD. I think we had to do almost 8. And I was eventually asked that you got to leave this laboratory, you got to leave this group of researchers. It's time to go. So I eventually defended and, bid farewell to the professors. And now here I am.
Officially Doctor of Science.
Of course. Yes.
Congratulations.
on the basis of what it is, But at the end of the day, we learn everything from the streets. We are like, so I don't think I don't go.
No, but bro, don't that is important. That's an important accomplishment considering where you come from and where you are, and seeing sometimes we don't reflect. Like, to look back, I'm like, damn, I really did this. Like, I am that kid from Brikama Newtown. I used to walk barefooted in my community. I used to play barefooted. I used to go to school hungry. My parents could not afford to feed me and provide all these necessities of education for me. Like, to see yourself reach the pinnacle of academic success is no small feat. And I'm sure deep down you know that for sure, that you've put several hours of commitment and sacrifice. I mean, bro, you had a baby, I think, when you had before your completion of your PhD program as well.
Yeah, I remember sometimes I got to carry my daughter to be finishing up some papers or corresponding, or you got to go to work and you're corresponding with another professor about a particular paper you got to do. But for me, what fascinates me with academics is that I was consistently and progressively in it. that I did not have to stay out and come back to it and all of that. So from 18, I had to, like 7, you got to go to nursery school. So if you look at my age, you realize that it was just all progressively school. Now you have to 18, you go to, get to university. At 22, you're done with a first degree. You work briefly for a year. You go for a 2-year master's program. At 25, you have your master's. You're probably back in the Gambia, work briefly for a year or two, still teaching, and then you got into a PhD. Within 30, and so you got a PhD. Alhamdulillah. That I got, like, academically, I think I've done what I needed to do. I have written papers that I think are worthy of what needs to be done. I've looked at complex societal problems from my own country, from my own neighborhood. If I tell you I did papers on gentrification and land dispossessions and all of this, these are not like, I'm not a master of geography, but at some point I put in the energy and the effort. You know what? I need to do this because this affects my community. I need to understand the complexities around some of these theories by, Neil Smith and other, outstanding scholars and philosophers to understand it, the human geography and all of that, and then dive into all of those. So I've done all kind of research that are related to science and society, probably not medical, but mostly about science and society, the biology of things and the natural ecosystems and all of that. So that's one thing that when I look at some of the documents, they are not just theoretical, they are not just, out of the blue, but they look at science and of course try to see how we solve social problems, because that's basically what academics should be. You should be able to, consciously, solve social problems. So if it is not about solving problems, what exactly are you investigating? It cannot be just in the blue that somebody throws away at the end of the day. But one could look back and say, you know what, we are going to talk about this. I have done some work on this. I should be able to have a conversation around it. So that's one thing that I am very pleased with. And looking at what I'm doing now, like working in, it's not something that one should think is so big, but then working for one of the biggest heavy civil engineering companies in America, it's nothing that I would ever dream of, if I'm to be honest. But like I said, I'm driven by curiosity in Kunja. Like, what, if I want something, I go for it. And I don't have that complex to say, no, I cannot do this, this is meant for special people. No. Of course, you will always have people who will connect you one way or another. You will always have the people who will guide you, and all that. So I'm very grateful to a lot of people along the way, who would shape you and put you on the right path, or put you in a place where you can quickly realize your full potential. And today, it doesn't matter you got a PhD. It's America. You know how it is. Still, most so science-related things, you got to do your license week in, week out, because workforce cannot take your degrees from you over here, but they can always take their license from you if you actually, malpractice, or if you actually do it wrong. Most of you're dealing with lead, asbestos, and you're dealing with heavy equipment. You are dealing with, life and, properties. You're dealing with the MTA, you're dealing with the federal or state government projects. So it's very important that you get all your license right and you operate within the confines of the law. So, which I'm very much grateful for. So
that's good. So now this is the time that I want us to really dive into your advocacy work in Gambia, especially in terms of climate advocacy and climate justice. And that's one area that I think, not that you've sort of, completely refused to talk about it, but I'm pretty sure this has always been part of your journey, even as a student in the Gambia from University of the Gambia. You've always been involved in climate advocacy. So we'll really delve into that now. Talk to us about what motivates you. Where did that?
Funnily, like when I was high school, I was deputy head boy for whatever reason. Our high school was a Christian-dominated high school. So, but like fence and all that. So what happened was when we were 11th grade going to 12, the 12 were already doing the exams, and then it was like they're going to select a new head boy, and they said, "Oh, we're going to have an election." To be honest, I was like a very popular kid. So I was like, you know what? We know our crew was like, we are very stubborn. And we have people from the arts class and we were in the science class that we think did not like us. We are like, if it is elections, we are going to win against these people. If the school decide to choose, they can choose them. So we went on, they said, okay, we are going to have a convention. I don't remember the full meaning, but I know my party was called PEP. I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it was PEP. So we went to a convention, I and one of my friends. So we were like, 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 running mates. So we were like 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 running mates. So A pregnant donkey does not deliver in public. So, we use these big jargons and everybody was screaming. So I think the principal was like, "In the new Kunjaro, they are going to win." So they suspended, they abandoned the election. So they choose. So they choose our opponents as head boy and then picks me as deputy. But when we were finishing high school, it brought about a lot of transformation in my personal development, and I was asked to plant a tree while I was leaving high school. So that was a great thing. I think the Pope, the Bishop was there, a lot of very important personalities, and Professor Gomez was invited as the guest speaker. So I had to plant that tree with Professor Gomez, and he started talking to me about university.
The
Talking
current
about,
Professor Gomez, the
yeah,
current Minister of Higher Education.
exactly. So we started talking about university education, environment, and why the tree was important, and that actually brought about some consciousness to environment and environmental related things from high school. So then and there was when we started the advocacy, planting trees here and there and all that. And then I eventually met Kemo Fati, who had a different project in mind, and then Sekou Suare Jabai. The three came together. We had Climate Watch the Gambia. We formed Green Up Gambia. It became a very strong foundation. We start doing, bringing back that consciousness to environment in the country generally. And then, a lot of people begin to realize that this is very relevant. And to be honest, like we've gone really far with that. And a lot of things have been achieved. We still do heavy consultancies. We still, get a lot of projects coming to the country, either for government or, for communities or for civil society participation. So Kim has been very instrumental in the background doing most of the work. I've been away, but of course, every other day I'm involved. So that's why when you see people telling you, "Alman trajaka mol barani moro, abe buka fodrong."
Yeah.
But if I tell you I make more money living in America, in the Gambia, than when I was there, you'll be surprised, because we got things that are functioning in the Gambia. We got institutions that are actually helping societies day in, day out. We sit over here and write consultancies that are actually getting funding in the Gambia. We're developing things that are developing tools for government and related institutions in related to climate advisory or climate information or related things. So that is why when you do not know, you're like, when you're not the end of the day, so that's how environmental advocacy has been. It was based on research. And environmental advocacy cannot be in isolation of knowledge. It's not just, I'm going to plant a tree. You need to understand what a tree is. What are the essence of planting a tree? What importance does it have? You talk about climate change. I've seen a lot of people talk about climate change. If you tell them what is climate change, they don't know what exactly they're talking about, because it had become a fancy lifestyle of advocacy and travels. But if you understand the science around it, and we pushed our way into it. When we first had to go to the first climate conference, we had to travel to Barcelona and then take buses all the way to Germany to actually sell our agenda. So Kwoku, you don't just see it today, you think that it all started top there today. It's a process. That's what a lot of people got to understand. Kwoku, yeah.
So talk to me about the climate situation in the Gambia. Obviously, you've highlighted that your team is still doing a great work. They're involved in a lot of initiatives back home. I know Kemo, a very good friend since high school, who was my senior, and we were in the peer health together. Incredible human being, and I can say same for Sekou Suare Jabai too. These are top young Gambians who are contributing immensely in the various spheres of social and economic growth in the Gambia. Now, obviously, climate change is huge. It's a global issue, including in this country where you and I live, where there's a constant and ongoing conversations around different issues about climate change. And there's a great segment of society that we live in that do not believe in the existence of climate change or just the urgency of climate matters. And there's also a segment of our society that do, in fact, believe that, we need to step up our efforts in respect to addressing climate issues. But talk to us about climate change in the Gambia. What is the public perception of climate change, and what efforts are being put in place, both at policy level and also at community level, in respect to really people understanding this very critical, important subject?
Now, the good thing about the Gambia is that the problem of climate change is no longer about either people understood it or not. I think people generally have a clear understanding of what climate change is. Let me try to avoid the Right. People have a clear understanding of what climate change is. Climate information is not primarily from the classroom. This is why I often believe in street knowledge, because the origin of all knowledge is from the household. Moro nimang nyalon suokon, is very difficult for you to learn that from a classroom, because the classroom gives you the formalities. You go to class first, they tell you more class or sweep and all that. But climate change is in such that you realize that it happens in our daily conversations intergenerationally. Like honey you can feel climate change in it. Because sometimes the adults will tell you that, oh, jana jibulo nene benjang. But oh, Jang used to be a thick forest. It used to have very wild animals. Do you have that consciousness to connect? Why are there no more? Why is the forest no longer here? Why is the water body no longer here? But because climate change happens through time, the more permanent changes in global climatic phenomena probably could happen within 30, 40 years and above. So when that happens, you realize that there is a shift in the ecological settings and every other thing, which is driven by either natural or human activities. Human activities, in a sense, if you look at the Malthusian theory of population, Brikama's population of 50 years ago is not Brikama's population today, either through migration, through childbirth, but the population has increased exponentially, increasing pressure on natural resources. Now you realize that even the water levels might have gone down. You realize that the heat level is increasing. Also, you look at technological advancement. Everybody want to have an air conditioner. Everybody want to have electricity. But is fossil fuel driving all of this? And fossil fuel actually has, some of these carbon compounds that lead to global warming. And global warming gives a resultant effect of climate change through time. Because all these, greenhouse gases, when they accumulate in the atmosphere, they actually, kind of create that barrier, not allowing the heat to come down, but not allowing it to escape up. And that is what is causing global warming. So in the Gambian context, we are situated in a position that we are not in the Amazon forest. We are also not in the desert, but we are just in between. That is why we are mostly affected by climate change impacts. In a sense, if you go down to the Badibu ends, like we know desertification is fast approaching that end, that is why it's still something that is very key in the Gambia. Oh, we have enough land. We can go into agriculture. It's political talk. How long, when last was a research done to determine the fertility and productivity level of the Gambian lands? Nobody will tell you. But a politician will tell you on TV, oh, we have fertile land. How did he know? Where is the data? Where is the information that is telling you that Gambia's got a fertile land? Over the years, you realize that you're cultivating the same land for 10 years. And what is happening politically is that politicians, like, the land is just like, human health. Before you put fertilizer on it, fertilizer should be based on need. Maybe it actually lacks NPK, or it lacks, phosphorus or potassium. How much is it lacking? How much is required? All of these things are calculated. You should actually take samples and go and test them at maybe NARI or another research institute, and to determine what the deficiencies are. And then you put in those deficiencies to make sure you kind of neutralize all of those that are needed.
Yeah.
But the way we treat our lands is that somebody would just look and say, okay, I'm just going to add fertilizer to it. Are you intoxicating the land? You don't know. Are you putting the required capacity? You don't know, because you do not know what the land needs. So we do not give the right prognosis to our lands. It's just like you go to hospital and nobody actually examines you and give you HIV/AIDS medicine or give you cancer medicine. That's how we're treating our lands in the Gambia because of our politics. And you have agriculture ministers who would say, oh, government is going to give you fertilizer. But how are you applying this fertilizer? Just throw it down on the ground. You are either intoxicating that land, you're killing all the microbes in that soil, probably depending on how much quantity you are putting in there. So at this stage, we cannot tell, or we cannot continue that false narrative. Back then, we had fertile land. But through time, there is a decline in the productivity of Gambian soils. You realize that a land area, you can actually grow, let's say, sareti tang or falitang from, a land. Now it might give you just one. Are we thinking around it? Are we asking the questions why? Are we questioning why productivity level have gone down? Because fertility is having the essential nutrients in their right proportion. But productivity is the ability to support plant growth.
Mm-hmm.
So if the fertility is not in its right proportion, it will have a resultant effect on the productivity because the soil needs those nutrients. And if you intoxicate it with the nutrients, what would happen? It's no longer productive enough. And then the microbial activities also help in plant growth. So you know, jambando fai lala ko fai olbefa. Which one is going to support the plant growth? And this has been our agriculture. We just throw seeds on the ground and believe that by divine interventions they will just grow. Agriculture has passed that stage. But of course, that tells you about climate change in a sense that, you know, we keep clearing our farmlands and then growing. And because it's not giving us enough, we clear more and then we are losing our forest cover. Our population is increasing. We are building more houses. We need more wood. We are cutting more forests. Farms are no longer producing enough. We get into charcoal burning. So you realize that we are impacting our ecosystem altogether. And each of these species we see are all interdependent and interrelated. If we have a mango here, it grows from a little one and goes all the way up and bears fruits, and we eat those fruits. Now, human beings also have a life cycle. When we die, these little termites feed on us. And of course, we turn into probably soil. That's manure. And the plants also use that. And they use that to actually feed and, of course, produce mangoes again for other humans to. So you realize that that is the life cycle of every other being. We are all interrelated and interdependent. So that has been the case altogether.
So that's who are the climate actors in the Gambia? Which agencies or institutions are principally responsible to ensure that, in fact, that there is some level of policy alignment um, when it comes to climate? Like, for example, look at the rainy season, right? You know, should we be worried that now the amount of rain we get annually is declining or is diminishing more and more and more?
The
Who is
last time, the last time I checked, the amount of rain used to be, let's say, 2,000, 500 millimeters, and it went all the way to 800. It's declining, all through time. We see saltwater intrusion in our freshwater ecosystems and all of that. So the institutions responsible are quite many. At the end of the day, they all have different, responsibilities. But altogether, like I said, this is a multidisciplinary subject. It requires a concerted efforts, integration of efforts by different actors. So we have a, Department of Water Resources that does all the research, for climate and climate advisory information. We know the Department of Disaster Management Agency is also another stakeholder. The Ministry of Environment is like the top up there, the National Environment Agency. Now the ministry has two line departments, Department of Forestry and also
I
how
think
do you
somebody's
call
trying
it?
to get hold of you, Mama.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you can go and come back.
But just give me a second. Let me check what.
We'll be right back. Omar will be right back. He's just taking care of something real quick.
Oh, I'm right here.
But yes, you were on about the
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm getting you. Just trying
yeah.
to avoid the sun.
So yeah, so you were talking about the agencies responsible and how collective it is that each
Right.
sector.
So all of these agencies I'm talking about, the National Environment Agency, the Ministry of Environment with its two line departments, and disaster and Department of Water Resources. You also realize that even fisheries, health, and other things are quite important when it comes to Gambia's climate change policy of 2016. All of these government departments and institutions are, they all have their roles and responsibilities. But first, what is lacking is empirical, because climate change impacts on agriculture is different from climate change impacts on fisheries and fisheries resources. You also realize that its impact on urban infrastructure is different. Now, climate change and city development, or you look at sustainable cities, or you look at, all of these sustainable development goals, at the end of the day, all of these things are interlinked and interrelated. Now, in the Gambia, we look at climate change from the aspect of, oh, it's going to affect our agriculture, it's going to affect our water bodies, it's about trees and all of that. It's beyond that. It goes into urban infrastructure. And the key problem we have is that we are not mainstreaming climate change in our infrastructural development. That is why many a times you see that we are constructing new roads without proper drainage systems. That is not factoring climate change, because evidently sama benalale. What about it?
Mhm.
And in Jokeradung, when the carrying capacity of the soil is exceeded, water moves as runoff. Now, when there is so much rain, not all of it is going to the ground. When the pore spaces are filled up, water moves as runoff. That is where it is important to have drainage system. That means you are building your urban infrastructure with consciousness to climate change. But whereas you're not conscious of climate, what is going to happen? You have a lot of floods. But when you were building your house, look at what Gambians are doing. He tiles everywhere. Imagine tiling your entire compound. It's going to rain in that house. Where will the water go? It's not going to the ground, because you have now subjected your entire household to impermeability. No water can go to the ground. It has to all move out. Now, if all the water is to move out, tile, and water does not go to the ground and everything has to move to the ocean, where will you dig the boreholes? How are you going to have the groundwater recharge? So that is why it is important that we don't look at climate change just from the aspect of forest and forest ecosystems, but look at it from our urban infrastructural development that comes into play, physical planning. To tell that if you go to Europe, that is what we call the biotope area factor. Now, the biotope area factor is calculated in a way that in your entire household, the entire land, there is a portion that have to be green, have to be green space, have to have direct connection to the ground. You can put pavement in some places, you can put tiles in some places, but you cannot tile an entire house. So that talks about climate change versus urban infrastructure and sustainable cities. But again, beyond that, you also look at health and diseases. There are climate related, some of those, because climate smart agriculture, if people do not have enough food, that actually comes into play, malnutrition and all of those things. But again, look at our rural communities. Women don't have time. That is where social innovation come into play. How much time do women spend? Maybe 2-3 hours in a single day that you are doing the same. Another 2-3 hours. How much time are women spending just to do basic chores? When in reality, we can get solar multifunctional platforms. It's the sun that is driving the energy. Put in probably a washing machine and a milling machine. They just have to put their stuff in there and still have other activities to do that is going to be income generating to the family. That is climate smart. Otherwise, you're spending 10 hours just kakuroke.
Mm-hmm.
When you could actually have a solar plant that basically gets you energy to actually use the solar, a washing machine. Again, that is not polluting anything. But also look at our grid system, that we have to be dependent on heavy fuel that is coming from abroad. But everybody wants electricity in the Gambia. But the Gambia does not have oil and gas. we have to import all of this, and we have to use generators. Me alam ko kafo ko generator number 10, number 30. Me alam ko sanjital dulu ko man to maybe kabenta ni tama wulu what generator leba Gambian for saying. CC balbo bunta na lab beto, and then of course they are increasing our pollution potential. And look at motor min katara na bango kanin dole bela motor nyato moro. Kani nyato fong ibukaje. Imagine the pollution potentials. So all of those things are open development that need to be considered when you are giving even credentials to vehicles. You need to tell that this vehicle is not roadworthy, not just because an accident will get, but also you look at the climate smart initiatives. We are not saying bring in all these fancy technologies of hybrids here and there. But I can't me along go through cold dolby jamoro ni will be nyado kay mo mi bukalo ni kesa mo. So
1970.
all of those things
Yeah.
are climate conversations.
Yeah, I mean, Omar, I honestly would have loved. I don't know much about climate change myself, but I feel like you're giving me a really good rundown of what this process involves, and I wish we can really continue. But it looks like parental duties is calling right now, and I was
We're good. Khadija can, she's all right. I love my daughter. For some reason, she's very stubborn. I like the fact that she's very critical about a lot of things and she wants to be present. I
if
see
you're
a lot
okay
of
with it, if you're okay with it,
yeah, we're good. Don't even mind her.
yeah.
That's the point. She wants to
So
be part of the conversation.
good. So thank you, Khadija. You're part of the conversation. I can tell you that for sure if you can hear me. But let's talk about land and land matters in the Gambia. Now you're part of a thing called I think securing future through land action. That may not be the correct description of it in terms of its name, but you can walk me through. But
Securing futures is born out of necessity. Born out of necessity in a sense that when we speak about it, most so we the natives of Bruford, is deep down in our hearts because we're not just looking at it professionally or from the research work. That's why most of the times I try to keep myself out of the conversation as a party to it and deal with it as a professional. What are you doing like that? So the land issues that are. Oh, you've arrived, right? Okay. Don't worry, you want to be here. Now, just be quiet. Now, the land issues that have been talked about are primarily, things that happen either within our communities. But historically, it talks about customary land ownership. You look at the land regimes in the Gambia. Land is either owned by the state, which is a state property, owned by an individual, and that's like, let's say, personal properties here and there. And you also know that there are communal properties like Mansagadi no Dentala, and you also have common property. Meaning at some point, the can just come and do whatever with it. And because of those land regimes existing, and we have the customary land ownership regimes in the Gambia and all this leasing stuff, the problem fundamentally became the state of the Gambia existed after the communities existed. Berikama la soro da Gambia nyala. Nia for mol la faham robe fenkel domani. We mean like the Republic of the Gambia existed in 1970.
Yeah.
Brikama existed probably hundreds of years before that.
Yeah.
That means Brikama had its own government. Government, I mean, alkalo nimbulundala. Wala muntolla yala mansakundalti. Those ones existed long before the Kabilos existed. The lands were owned prior to government existing, prior to Jawara being president of the Gambia. So Gambia as a republic does not own land. It can only own land through policy. It can only own land through legislation, but not customarily, because the communities existed prior. Now, when that happened, you realize that government realized they need land. When government wants land, what they do is they go to communities and ask communities to give them land for a particular development purpose. And the communities cooperate with government to ensure that it is a collective development. But since the commodification and financialization of land, it had become more problematic than it was before. But if you look at it historically, let's say 25, 30 years ago, for you to get a land in the Gambia, you just need call and not to give to some community elders, and they give you. Niento la sate bal kono jibe ka jelo ko dola jonko danda damen dola bungo starta wolto eta dola ko. So abeka ke sirin kan dingol lati because mol kan yo sindi wala nyam. But since we started having compounds, then there becomes problems because land has become a commodity. It has become, a means of financial transaction. It had become like, a property to actually, buy and sell. So that is where we got it wrong, because we did not have policies that regulated that. We did not have the right means and mechanisms put in place to ensure that the future is taken care of. And that is why I call the TDA as a land dispossession mechanism. And specifically, this was born out of the challenges faced by communities in Combo, to be specific, Brufut. Now, what was the history to this? In 205 or around that, when the Gambia was to host the African Union Summit,
Yeah.
the former President Jammeh, what he did was to seize land from the people of Brufut and gave it to a developer. And this developer, imagine taking over 33 hectares of land, decided to compensate the community with just 250,000. It was not a compensation, it was a forced giving, because the people said, we are not selling our lands and we are going to retain our lands.
Which developer is this? Is this staff?
Yes, of course.
Okay, just want to make sure.
TAF did not buy land from the people of Brufut. It was nothing like, a buyer and a seller. There was no seller here. It was just somebody who dealt with the former president and seized lands from the people of Brufut. And these lands were never within the TDA, because if it is 800 meters from the beachfront, if you measure, it will not be like 800. So those lands are not within the TDA. Of course, I know government needed them for the AU, whatever, for the development of, but you get it in means that are quite within the confines of the law. Discuss with the community and then have a consensus, and of course, compensate them adequately. But whereas you face resistance, then the people don't want to give up their land, there should be a way to go about it. That is why countries have laws and regulations. But instead, they used a militarization methodology to actually bring paramilitary and beat our people, of course, brutalize them, demolish their properties, and forcefully seize their lands. And that is where you have the tough estate today. And that is the history to it. But of course, fast forward, when this was happening, some of us would have been less than 10. Some of these people never knew that people will grow up to come to a point that they will do a lot of extensive research in this subject and come to tell them that what you did to our people was wrong. Again, TAF would often tell you that I got all my documents right. If they want, let them go to court. Bro, you studied law. You think Jammeh as a president will tell one of his lands minister, can you please give these people all the documentations? And the minister would say no. He was the head of state. Whatever he wants in terms of documentation, he will get. But that does not mean that he actually bought the land from the people. No, they got the land fraudulently because they criminally connived against our people and seized their lands. And of course, created documents for it because they have authority and power. Mm-hmm. But why do we call TDA a land dispossession mechanism? Do you realize that TDA is only on the waterfront? Now, simply because historically, our tourism has been sun, sand, and sea. And then the tourism hotspots were the Senegambia belt and, of course, the coastal communities. But since then, we've never thought of decentralization and making sure that all these administrative capitals to become like big capitals with heavy investments and development. I shouldn't be born in Brikama and go to work in Banjul. I shouldn't be born in Janjamburi and go to work in Mansakongo. All of these administrative capitals needed to be built to a certain point that they would be capitals of each of these regions. That there will be massive infrastructural development that will boost economic activity in those regions. But of course, that is not what happened. It's all centralized in the Combos, and we have a lot of people coming there. There's a lot of rural-urban drift, and then you realize that the population our population concentration is mostly within the Combos, and everybody wants land, and land became a heavy commodity. And then people moved away from Nakuruodi Karle landing to selling, to SUVs, to big vehicles, to other things. But the problems we have is sometimes you have inter-community conflict, and sometimes you have intra-community conflict, and sometimes you have conflict between communities and the state. Because the state does not own land, but the state uses policy mechanisms to seize lands or to actually acquire land from communities. This includes forest parks. Because some forest parks are acquired in a way that the community will tell you, we want to protect this forest ecology. But the community is not a government of its own. Even though we have Alcalos and Bulundal and those hierarchies, but they cannot control the forest. Because if somebody destroys it, back then, what I'm on yeah.
Yeah.
Police, because they will tell you the country has laws. But back then we have those traditional structures, not written, but of course they actually police and regulate society. And then we did not think that Khadija, no, we did not think that there will come a time that will not be able to serve us. Now that cannot serve us, we resort to going to police. You got to be quiet. A lot of people are watching that. You got to be quiet, okay? Be quiet. Okay. So fast forward, you realize that what traditional structures are not serving us. We have to resort to the law. Now the law is nini modun danyola. You have land issues. That's a problem.
Yeah.
But that's because we do not have standard procedures to take care of land ownership. Alkalo bastamplele, yeta area council, and you go to physical planning. But all of these institutions are not working together. They are working in isolation. So you would see that one land can be registered 2-3 times because all these actors should be working, together. But if they all work in isolation, then who takes care of the greater responsibility? That becomes a fundamental problem. But whereas the government needs the land, it has to be government discussing with the communities, the rightful owners of these lands, but not to enact a law that will dispossess these people of their birthrights. And again, you look at it. Masakunda kuro narete o land be busi ko ya jamele beta atol dam mal ko talala minister team.
Bro, yeah, that's wild.
It's just like you and I, we say, oh, we're helping university students, and at the end of the day, we say, oh, we actually secured 30 scholarships, and we say ngatalan dam malu team.
Yeah.
Bro, that does not resonate with a conscious mind. This is a government that was supposed to come to bring about reforms, and that includes land reforms in the Gambia, because we have fundamentally land problems in the Gambia, inter-community conflict. And you know that in some parts of the Gambia, where people used to have used some lands for grazing animals, is now used for, let's say, producing crops. And then the nomadics and the crop producers are at loggerhead. Because I take care of my animals, you take care of your, you take care of your crops, but at the end of the day, now we are no longer getting together because the land area is no longer good enough or it's not big enough. Then we are at loggerhead. That's also happening in some communities. But also you realize that a brother will sell this land, another brother sells it, another brother sells it. That's also a problem. And also we have real estate proliferation in the country, where they sell anything and everything without even considering the fact that people are going to generate waste, and waste need to be actually dumped. So all of these things are not actually factored in the development of our communities. And we have a physical planning. Just like where you people were staying somewhere around Carnifing by MDI or Omar, you realize that some streets, but that's failure of physical planning. So all of these things are land-related challenges. And again, if you come to Bruford Heights, where you have all these big estates, but if you are a poor person, what will you do? It will force you to move to where you can actually settle, because then and there, you don't have the normal traditional markets, it's supermarkets and stuff like that. Mobebe family is no longer a community, it's westernized, so you have to be forced to move through displacement. It's either you sell that land that belongs to you to go and buy a smaller piece of land somewhere that you feel that you and your family would be comfortable, and then you will have your social feelings that ninja mol kanyanda. So all of those things play a role in land and land management issues. But again, the bigger problem here is that we continue to sell everything without considering the fact that in the next 50 years, what is going to be Gambia's plan? Yeah. What lands now belongs to government? You realize that government in 2025 have started trying to even sell the monkey park for a market valued price when government has no land. The government started, kind of de-reserving protected forest ecologies for some infrastructure and development projects. That tells you that government does not have land. But it's the same government that would see a state land among ministers, and of course see a state land among National Assembly members. For the Barakat and Toltiba.
Yeah.
Some people who did nothing, they just become elected members in parliament, and they share lands among themselves. When somebody who worked as a teacher for 35 years is not giving a state land or is still renting. that tells you about, because land is basically an essential factor of production, and it is on which every human activity is done. So if a human being cannot have a place to live, you are already subjecting that person to indignity. More so musol mi yaron ko ka aisla wa fuela bungol belo salaji ma fon ite kaito di wala ko ala bungol loje ya lo fosa kana ba ite na yo be boy e ko li wolo dami manyan na lo la je bare tele kaito di la. That's essentially a problem in our government.
Yeah.
That's a physical planning problem. So the problems that are related to land are not just because molle ba African wala moni molle dundanyola. It's essentially about the trajectory of our development towards the next 20, 30 years, which we are not factoring. Because if you go to Joswang now, the Joswang Cemetery is the only major one there. No further. They will take their dead bodies and take them to Brikama Komakata. But also look at it, when you look at Backwater dump site, when the dump site was initially put there, it was not a human settlement. The human settlements met the dump site there. Another essential failure of land planning. Because a proper, a proper dump site or probably a proper landfill, within the landfill perimeters, 500 meters at all sides should be inhabitable, because there are potential pollutants that could actually go up to that level. But
yeah,
a hospital is just nearby. So you realize that if you go to Brikama now, Tambana, which is a dump site. But when Tambana was first identified, it was not a human settlement. So the exponential population growth is not tallying with the existing land resources in the Gambia. Gambia is one of the countries that is like, when we talk about population density, it's highly dense. It used to be, I think, 130 per square kilometer. So then Gambia need to do land banking and, of course, have serious land-related policies that are going to take care of the future. Otherwise, we're actually doing a lot that is going to have a damaging impact. Because 50 by 50. 50 by 50 in America is probably 5 houses, if it is for settlements. But again, we do not have what we call a land map, or probably we don't have what we call a land use act, that this is an agricultural land, this is for human settlement, or this is for this particular purpose. All land can be used for anything in the Gambia, except for the protected parks. Wala na ni samana ra ko bungol be boy ka bo asamale bungol boy moro e bungol farolo kono e ka molje ka tara jo so word like avo go boy fenko atondi fenko le findira na crocodile came out ghettos le findira na korda kono moro, you are living in the ghetto's house. These are the realities, because you cannot live in a flood plain and tell us that, oh no, flood le na bungoti nyama sakunda nyanda korodila. In the first place, Masakunda shouldn't have allowed you to settle there.
Yeah.
So essentially, we have a physical planning problem. It's not about just the purchasing power, but it's about where are we settling? How are we protecting our ecosystem? But if government get to a point that they're telling you we are going to sell, our, protected parks that we have, our common heritages, then that tells you that fundamentally and essentially something is wrong. But again, it's the same government that will want to give some forest ecosystems to its funders to actually do business.
Now, to wrap this up, because obviously you need to spend some time with Khadija. Talk to us, what are the steps that the think tank is instituting to ensure land justice, especially for the people of Burfoot who you all believe deserve some level of recompense or some level of justice in terms of what is taken away from them?
Sometimes it's not just about Burfoot. The whole point is that otherwise this is going to be a time bomb. It's like a ticking one. You realize that it was this land-related issue that led to the death of 3 young people in Faraba Bantang, because they want to take a women garden and give it to a private miner to mine. That led to the killing of the young people because they were resisting that our land is for our garden, because our livelihoods depend on it. Go to Gunjur, go to Sanyang, go to Batokunku, that whole belt. They've mined all the sand in those areas, left ditches all over, and left the communities that used to have their livelihoods or paddy farms or vegetable gardens around those areas with insupportable burden of environmental degradation. How do we solve this problem? Now, to solve this problem, we need a land use policy. Now, how do we develop this land use policy? That is what we are doing. making sure that everything that this government is to do, or what the Gambian people are to do, it should be based on science and society, based on empirical scientific investigation, not just let's develop a policy, or for policies to be donor driven and they do not actually match the local context and reality. So what we are doing is to make sure that there is that research and there is enough knowledge and information to rely on for the development of some of these policies, because you cannot tell people because science have to be based on justifications and of course empirical evidences.
Empirical,
So
yeah.
we are very much into research, and of course we use these research findings to communicate to government as for what we think could be done better, and that includes the decentralization of urban infrastructures and making sure that all these administrative capitals of all these regions are actually well equipped and developed to a point that everybody should be able to have their own capital city in their own region. Secondly, what we are thinking of doing is to ensure that there is not just a top-bottom approach to policy development, but of course inclusivity and participatory approach that includes customary land owners to tell you historically how land is owned in the Gambia and how we can actually have a land use act where it will look into this should be an agricultural land, this should be for human settlements, this should be for this particular purpose, this should be a forest ecosystem. But again, communities give their lands to government to protect, and government will reserve them and sell them. So that's failure of governance. So in short, it's about decentralization and of course effective policy development that is based on empirical scientific information and not just media and office oh, this is what the donor said we have to do, and they are just donor driven just to satisfy the donor. At the end of the day, they do not meet the the requirements or the taste of what exists as in reality in our communities.
Well, Malmo, it's been absolutely wonderful. You've taught me so much about a variety of issues that really are extremely important. And on a very short notice, too, you agreed to come on this podcast. I think this is the time where we give more attention to Khadija. We're not being fair to her at all. But I'm going to bring you back because I think there are other issues that I would have uh, really preferred to bring up for us to talk about. But myself, I need to hop on to something else. I have today off, but it's been a little less than an hour and a half. But I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for all of your insightful takes, and really for the brilliant work that your team in the Gambia and also your think tank are doing in respect to land and also climate change. It's been really enlightening for me, and I hope that you really also enjoyed the conversation we just had.
It's always great talking to you, man. And you're doing a great job with this platform, man. I don't know how this idea came about. Probably somebody in Bruford gave you some insight, which I'm very, very proud of. It's giving, it's keeping a conversation alive about our country, and of course, bringing people together. The most important thing in life is about bringing people together, different expertise, and then learning from each other and getting to know what we could do better collectively for our country. Nobody's an island and nobody knows it all. But at the end of the day, the more we communicate, the more we have these conversations, one can be right here, one can be wrong there, but we put all the wrongs in the one basket and pick all the rights. Of course, we will get there as a country. Unless we are not communicating. So long we are communicating, there will always be solutions to our problems. And sometimes you see people have issues because they are not communicating. So when we communicate, probably we all have the same mentality. We all probably love our country equally or more than each other. But at the end of the day, if there is that communication and collaboration, we should be able to do one thing or another, irrespective of our political differences, irrespective of our thought differences and all of that. What is common is the common denominator is the Gambia. But so nice talking to you and hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omar Malmo Sambou. You're definitely coming back. I can assure you that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Dija, you want to say bye-bye to Uncle?
Bye-bye, Dija.